All right, let's jump right into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to look at a piece of ancient text that honestly reads way less like a dry historical document and a whole lot more like a high-budget cinematic action broadcast. We're looking at the book of Nahum. What we've got here is literally a front-row seat to the spectacular, absolute collapse of an unstoppable ancient superpower, the Assyrian Empire, and specifically its massive capital city, Nineveh. If you really want to understand how ancient people conceptualized the sudden fall of an invincible regime, a place that was actually the largest city in the world at the time, this is the text for sure. It's vivid, it's brutal, and it is incredibly dramatic.
Right out of the gate, the author hits us with sheer overwhelming scale. Before we even get to the armies or the sieges, the text introduces this avenging god who literally controls the elements themselves. The imagery here, it's completely designed to make you feel incredibly small. We're talking about a force whose way is in the whirlwind in the storm, where, quote, clouds are the dust of his feet. Seas dry up, rivers run dry, and the very mountains quake and melt away. So the author's really setting the stage here. Nineveh isn't just facing some rival army. They're up against an unstoppable, cosmic force of fierce anger and poured-out fire.
So that brings us to Section 1, an oracle of vengeance.
Chapter 1 opens with this brooding, violent threat directed squarely at Nineveh. It characterizes the deity as a jealous, avenging figure who absolutely does not leave the guilty unpunished. And this brilliantly sets up a dramatic contrast to drive the whole narrative forward. For Judah, which is pictured as a refuge in times of trouble, the text promises that their yokes will be broken, their shackles torn right off, and a messenger on the mountains will bring good news and peace. Sounds great, right? Well, in stark contrast, for Nineveh, the decree is just absolute annihilation. The text promises an overwhelming flood that will completely make an end of the city. They'll have no descendants to bear their name, their temple idols will be smashed, and get this, a grave is already being prepared for them, because they are, in the text's own words, vile.
Moving right along, Section 2, the siege and the storm.
Okay, entering Chapter 2, the text shifts gears completely. We move out of this cosmic, brooding poetry and straight into a frantic, high-octane action sequence detailing the actual breaching of the city. The author really wants you to see the terror advancing on Nineveh. Just listen to the vivid color palette they use here. The shields are red, the warriors are clad in scarlet. It's an intentionally terrifying, blood-red visual of an attacker advancing. The text is barking out these urgent commands to Nineveh, like, guard the fortress, watch the road, brace yourselves, marshal all your strength. But spoiler alert, as we'll see, all that frantic preparation is utterly useless.
Watch how this builds into just pure chaos. The pacing of the text becomes incredibly frantic at this point. We have chariots with flashing metal storming through the streets, rushing back and forth through the city squares. The author compares them to flaming torches, darting about like lightning. It's so visceral you can almost hear the crack of the whips and the clatter of the wheels on the stone, It's a masterful piece of descriptive writing that perfectly captures the total panic of a city whose defenses have suddenly been completely overwhelmed.
And then we hit the cinematic turning point. Quote, the river gates are thrown open and the palace collapses. This is the critical breach. Now, in the ancient world, water defenses were supposed to be the ultimate unbeatable security. But here, they fail spectacularly. The very heart of the empire, the palace itself, just crumbles. The text describes the city like a pool whose water is draining away, with people screaming, stop, stop, but absolutely no one turning back.
So the really crucial point is what happens next. The complete and total pillaging of Nineveh's seemingly endless wealth. The command goes out, plunder the silver, plunder the gold. The text makes sure to note that the supply of wealth from all its treasures is practically infinite. But this physical plundering triggers a complete psychological collapse. The author writes that she is pillaged, plundered, stripped, hearts melt, knees give way, bodies tremble, and every single face grows pale. That invincible aura of the empire, it's just vanished in an instant.
To really hammer this home, the text uses this brilliant metaphor. It asks, where now is the lion's den? See, Assyria was well known for its predatory military dominance. The author compares Nineveh to a fearless lion that killed enough for its cubs, strangled prey for its mate, and just filled its dens with the kill. It was an untouchable apex predator. But now, the Lord Almighty declares he will burn their chariots in smoke, the sword will devour their young lions, and the voices of their messengers will never be heard again. The apex predator has been completely neutralized.
Which leads us to Section 3, Woe to the Bloody City.
Now, if you're wondering why all this absolute destruction is happening, Chapter 3 lays out the brutal justification.
It's essentially the rap sheet for Nineveh's gruesome punishment. And wow, what a rap sheet it is. The author rapid fires these charges. Nineveh is labeled a city of blood, full of lies, full of plunder, never without victims. But it actually goes way further than just military violence. The text characterizes the city as an alluring harlot, a mistress of sorceries who literally enslaved entire nations through prostitution and witchcraft. Because of these overwhelming crimes, the decreed punishment is designed to make Nineveh a massive public spectacle. The text states her skirts will be lifted over her face to show the nations her nakedness and shame, pelting her with filth and treating her with utter contempt.
Now, the author anticipates that Nineveh might still think somehow it can survive this. To prove that's impossible, the author brings in a really striking piece of historical logic, directly comparing Nineveh to Thebes. Thebes was this incredibly powerful Egyptian city situated right on the Nile. Just like Nineveh, it had incredible water defenses. And just like Nineveh, it had boundless strength and powerful allies: Cush, Egypt, Put, Libya. Yet what was Thebes' ultimate fate? It was taken captive. Its infants were dashed to pieces, lots were cast for its nobles, and its great men were thrown in chains. The logic here is crystal clear. If heavily fortified, fiercely allied Thebes could fall so brutally, Nineveh's confidence in its own defenses is totally delusional.
Let's wrap this up with Section 4, the end of an empire.
Having laid out the cosmic threat, the physical siege, and the moral justification, the text details the final, inevitable stage of internal rot and collapse. And the author uses a series of really vivid metaphors to show just how effortless this final collapse will be. Take their defenses, for example. The author writes, "All your fortresses are like fig trees with their first ripe fruit. When they are shaken, the figs fall into the mouth of the eater." That's such a striking image, right? The defense network isn't just failing, it's practically offering itself up to the enemy. The text actually mocks the defenders, saying, "Look at your troops, they are all women. The gates of your land are wide open to your enemies. The fire has already consumed the bars."
But honestly, even worse than failing fortresses is cowardly leadership. This locust metaphor brilliantly illustrates the internal decay of the empire. The author notes that Nineveh increased its merchants until they were more numerous than the stars, but then compares them, along with the guards and officials, to swarms of locusts. Think about it. They settle in the walls on a cold day, just stripping the land of its resources. But the second the heat is on, the very moment the sun appears, they fly away, and no one knows where. The elite leadership simply abandons the city to its fate.
And this leads to a chilling declaration of absolute finality. The text addresses the king of Assyria directly, saying, "Your shepherds slumber, your nobles lie down to rest, your people are scattered on the mountains with no one to gather them." And then it drops the most devastating sentence. "Nothing can heal your wound, your injury is fatal." There is no sequel for Nineveh. There is no comeback story here. This ancient broadcast makes it absolutely clear that this is a permanent erasure of the empire.
We're going to end this explainer with the text's final, absolute mic drop thought. Quote, "Everyone who hears the news about you claps his hands at your fall, for who has not felt your endless cruelty?" That is such a profound universal question to just leave lingering in the air. When an empire built entirely on violence, on plunder, and on the suffering of others finally rots and collapses, there is no mourning. There is only the applause of the oppressed. It's a fascinating look at how ancient texts viewed the intersection of power, cruelty, and inevitable ruin. Thank you so much for joining me for this breakdown, and keep seeking out these incredible pieces of history.